Hello, everyone. Today is April 30th, 2022. I'm here today with Devon Taylor Gould. Devon is an English teacher teaching abroad in Chile. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Devon.
Thank you for having me today, Cruz. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. So, teaching abroad in Chile, how long have you been in Chile?
I've been in Chile since 2018. So
Wow.
I'm like over a little bit over 4 years now, and so
Wow. How did you decide to study, or not study, but work in Chile?
well, I graduated university and then I went to teach English a year in Madrid. And after a year there, I kind of got a little bored. It was a little bit harder to break into the Spanish social groups. And so I wanted more like cultural experience and feel part of the country rather than just being like with foreigners, which is kind of how it was. Um, and then like in South America, like because I wanted to continue with Spanish, in Central and South America, Chile just really seemed like the best option, with the most work available and then like the pay rates as well, the best like rate of living, I guess.
Very
And so.
nice. So, what do you think made breaking into the social circles in Spain more difficult?
Because I think in Madrid, which is like a very touristy city and a very like a lot of foreigners go and live in Madrid. Like I met like so many people like from other countries, like Germany, France, Italy, like so many other countries, but it was just really hard to find like the Spanish social groups as much because they kind of tend to stay like a little bit more closed off. Because it's just full of like foreigners, and so and they're like you're just kind of like another foreigner in a sea of foreigners. Where when I came to Chile, like people really enjoy talking with like a foreigner, especially people from the United States. And so like here you're a little bit more of a novelty, I guess. And so that makes it a lot easier, socially, I think.
What's the reason you say, especially from the United States?
Just because I mean, in Chile, generally speaking, overall, like the people that are like, it's a little bit less common to see like people from the United States or people from Europe, and so like those types of people here in Chile are really like a novelty, I guess. And like especially with English, everyone wants to learn English. Yeah, like it's crazy. Chile is very word of mouth, and it's crazy the amount of private classes I have to turn down. I could probably fill a whole schedule up just with private classes that people have asked me, because they want their kids to learn or they want to learn, and so people really enjoy those English speaking people here.
Wow, that's awesome.
Hmm.
So, what type of teaching do you do?
So I teach business. I teach business people. So I work for a company, and then like a business is looking to have English classes, and then they contract my company, and then I teach like their employees. Group classes are generally like mid-level managers, and then one-on-one classes that I have are generally with like the upper level managers, and like CFOs or like the head of sales and stuff like that.
Wow. And how is the level or quality of English speaking in Chile?
Getting better every day. I would say because I think like 10 years ago they weren't really teaching it that much in schools, but now like all the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, they're really focused on English a lot more. And so I think every year the English speaking is going to get better because English has kind of turned into the not global language, but like global business language. Because like here, if you're a Chilean working with people in China, you need to export whatever to China, the people in China are going to speak English to you. And so, yeah, it's kind of become like the international business language a little bit.
That's very interesting. Actually, when I was in Japan, I saw two different, you know, people that were not Americans. You can tell by the way they were speaking. They were speaking to each other in English.
Hmm.
And it was like, you two are obviously not Americans. Like, one was a Japanese restaurant host, and the other one was a restaurant customer. And, you know, I was amazed. I was amazed. I was like, this isn't Japanese you're speaking in. This isn't some other language that, like, maybe Chinese is the standard in East Asia. No, it is English.
Mhm. Everywhere in the world is looking for English teachers. You really just kind of point on a place on a map, and then you could see like what the rates are, how difficult it is to find a job. But almost in any country that's not already English speaking, there's jobs for English teachers. Central and South America, in Europe as well, and then Asia definitely right now is like the highest paid places. Like the Chinese are very focused on learning English, and those classes are generally the highest pay out of anywhere in the world for English teachers.
Our friend Philip from
Hmm.
high school football.
Hmm.
He is teaching English in Shenzhen, China.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, amazing. He
I,
actually, the entire winter quarter, they were all locked down for
mhm.
COVID, but yeah, he's teaching English in China.
I wonder what that's been like, the COVID situation in China, like how it's been watching the government operate.
That would
Because
be
here in
very
Chile, it's been
interesting.
interesting too. And so
What has been interesting about it in Chile?
Well, definitely, like, I mean, coming from the United States, I get both news, the United States and in Chile. And so Chile took a way harder, like a way harder stance on it from the beginning, with like lockdowns. You had to like ask for permission. You would have to go on the government website and say, "I'm going food shopping right now," and you could only leave the house twice a week. And police officers would be walking around and checking people's papers to make sure that they were out. Just recently, they got rid of, like last week, or no, 2 weeks ago on Thursday, the mask in public spaces. So just in the last 2 weeks, you've been able to take off your mask outside walking. And so they've
Wow.
generally taken like a harder stance, completely shut the borders down for a long time. And so,
How has that been on the country, and how
uh,
for you?
pretty good. I think everybody was pretty happy with it. Not happy with it, but I think everybody understood like the government is trying to save lives any way necessary. And then after that, it will come. Like whatever happens will come. But their number one goal was to save as many lives as they could. And then after that, like they'll deal with it. And so they've taken a really hard stance on it, and people have taken it really seriously. Like Chile's up to over 95% vaccinated with like
Wow,
3 doses, and so and people are getting their fourth now. So
that's exciting.
mhm. I think Chile just won some award from some, I don't know, some body saying like for about their COVID response and
Okay.
like how they handled the pandemic.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how did life change for you as a teacher through the pandemic?
Well, as a teacher, before I would go to multiple different businesses in a day throughout Santiago. Like I'd go to like a wine company in the morning, then I would have like a Walmart class, and then maybe I would go to Samsung. So I was traveling throughout the city, public transportation, and then that all switched online. And really for English teachers, the pandemic has kind of been blessing in disguise somewhat, at least in the work life, because now all my classes are online, and that allows me to have more classes because I'm not spending time in transport. I'm not spending money on transport either, which is a huge savings.
Yes.
And now, like in the United States, you could teach anywhere in the world. You could teach anywhere in the world in the United States, because everywhere is looking for more English teachers.
That's incredible.
Mhm.
It's really opened a lot of opportunities then.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I love work from home.
Me
I,
too.
like I was like, "Oh, I have to stay inside and not see anyone and play video games and just stay at home all day." Yeah, I'm fine with that. I've been training for that my whole life. And
Yes.
so,
Yes. It's very interesting that this capability was there for maybe 3 or 4 years beforehand, but then
mhm.
because of something very dramatic, it just had to be implemented immediately.
No,
And
and
it
it's
stayed.
mhm. No, all the businesses are sticking with it, because for them it's better. Their employees, they don't have to schedule like meetings or anything. They don't have to get the meeting room set up for like an English class. Their employee can just have their English class at their desk, and then that's it. The only problem with English classes online are group classes, One-on-one classes, I feel like I can really have the same level of conversation and activities, but group classes online, it's a lot harder to maximize student speaking time. That's the one problem with online classes with groups. If like the application doesn't have breakaway capabilities where you can like send two students to different things so they can talk within themselves, it's a little bit harder to increase student talking time in the classroom. And so,
Okay.
but besides that, it's really been great.
Okay. So student talking time is a pretty important variable.
Yeah, especially with language classes. And so like because before in an English class, I could be like, oh, you two speak English to each other, you two speak English, and you two speak English. And so like all students are talking. Where now in the group classes, it's a lot longer to be like, okay, now you say something. Okay, now you say something. And so the speaking time for the students goes down in group classes quite a lot online, especially if it doesn't have breakaway capabilities. Like I use Blue Jeans for a lot of them, and there I can like create separate meeting rooms and send students to have private conversations within it.
Is Blue Jeans a video conferencing application?
Yes.
Okay. I've never heard of that one.
Okay. Yeah. No, I hadn't either. Until like a couple years ago, until the pandemic, and it's because a lot of our classes are through Voxy, and so Voxy uses Blue Jeans.
Okay. So you've never been on Zoom?
No, I do have some classes on. I mean, I've used all of them like Zoom, Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, Blue Jeans, depending on the client and like their IT department and what they have. Because certain companies are like, oh, we're not going to use Zoom because
Yes.
security stuff, and so really depends on the client.
Got it. Got it. And then Zoom and Blue Jeans have breakout capability. Does Google Meets and Teams? No.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's a huge feature that they need to get on.
Yeah, well, yeah, at least for like the group classes or like the if you have like 6, 7 students in a class and it's a language class where you want them speaking as much as possible.
Yes. I was in a class of maybe 30 people, and the breakout sessions, even getting 30 people down into groups of 4 is vital. I mean,
Hmm.
because if you're in a class of 30, you can literally go the whole day without speaking
Hmm.
easily.
Hmm.
It's very easy. It actually takes effort to speak sometimes.
Hmm.
So forcing them to be in situations where they cannot avoid speaking is vital.
Yeah, and then you realize like per student they you can break it out, and then per student is each getting 10 minutes of speaking time but in that breakaway session. But like if it was all together, you could maybe have one student say one thing for 30 seconds, and then one question is half the class, getting every student to respond to it. And so
Got
the
it.
breakout sessions are huge.
Wow. Okay. How do you think, you know, so you say English is language of business, and
Mhm.
that's what I've been thinking, but how do you think that, looks in the future? Like how in 10, 20 years from now? What do you think, for countries like Chile where, Spanish is still huge, like a lot of people still speak Spanish?
Mhm.
Or, what do you think is going to be like the standard across the world?
No, I mean like English is kind of already set up as like the most popular second language in the world. Like in almost every country, like they're teaching like the native language, and then at some point in like their education, their basic education, they have to take English. So like at least here in Chile, like in the schools and stuff, they're all learning English, and in the next 10 to 20 years, unless there's crazy breakthroughs in like translation technology, like that could be instant, like instantly translating things. I still think English teachers and like English is going to be one of the most important subjects. Because you think about it, like a lot of these things take time. And so like 10 years from now, the Chileans that are kids are going to speak way better English than the adults now because
Yes.
they've been exposed to that. And I imagine it's the same in, I mean, I don't know as much about China, but I imagine it's the same in China. Like a lot of those schools are going to be teaching English as a second language. And so I
Yes.
just imagine China because they have like one of the best rates of pay for English teachers, which means high desires. So
Absolutely. And if you look at a country like India that
mm,
was colonized, 250 years ago or so, I had a completely different language, and now it's like all Indians speak very good English.
mhm, yeah.
And so even, another country, I've been to Africa several times, and not too many countries, even the English speaking ones outside of South Africa don't have such great rates of, just don't have the greatest capability of actually speaking the language and saying it grammatically. Whereas I went to South Africa and it was, I mean, it didn't matter what level of financial, you know, whatever financial status you had, almost everyone was educated and almost everyone had a, solid understanding and, solid speaking capability.
Hmm.
And I think for us as Americans, especially right now, as transition is happening, it's a huge opportunity because the rest of the world over the next 50 years is going to start listening in English.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so what what were you going to say?
everyone's already listening to English because our Netflix and all that stuff.
Yes.
Our series go all over the world, and so yeah. But sorry to interrupt. Yeah, continue.
No, and that's a good point. Like I think one of the most famous people today, celebrities, is like The Rock, the
Hmm.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson, because like he's in all these movies. These movies get mass streamed to the rest of the world. They're very high quality. They're very, entertaining. And then like he's just speaking to people, and he's kind of crazy looking dude too. So it's like, that's a huge opportunity right there, especially right now, because maybe in 50, 60 years, like everyone will have a high standard of English, a high capability to speak English. But like we as Americans, people from Australia, people from Canada and the UK, like we have a very good opportunity to influence the world, teach the world, because one, we have the highest quality English speakers, the highest volume of high quality English speakers, and probably the highest quality English speakers in the world. And that's the new standard. I mean, I don't think China's popular language and a lot of people are learning Chinese, but it's not going to be the standard. I mean, not here, not in this country, not in Europe. I don't think in Africa, just because I don't think in South America either. Like those characters are so different. At least English and Spanish and French, they all have the same, Greco-Roman alphabet or something like that.
Hmm.
Greek.
Yeah,
So it's going
not
to
Greek
be
alphabet. I'm pretty sure it's like Latin, right?
Latin.
No.
Yes, Latin alphabet.
Mhm.
Yes, you're right. So, I mean, it's something that we should be, and something that like you've already taken advantage of, but like that international market right now is easier to tap into than ever,
Mhm.
and it's growing. Like
Yeah.
the United States was top dog, still is a top dog, but the rest of the world, with the increased networking capability, with the increased I think just networking capability in general just
And just
means
globalization, just
globalization.
increased globalization over the last 50, 100 years. And
Yes.
then America and like being in such a strong position during that time has kind of like put English into like that most popular like second language category. And then so now it's kind of just that's where it's progressing. Because if an Italian is doing business with a person from Chinese, the Italian knows a little English, and the Chinese person generally knows a little bit English. And so
Yes.
it's just kind of turned out the easiest way. Luckily, yeah, very luckily for native English speakers,
Yes.
because I mean, if you're born in the United States and you got any degree, any type of university degree, doesn't matter what it's in. You can do a 120-hour TEFL course and go teach English almost anywhere in the world. You could just spin the globe, put your finger on it, and I bet you could find like a market there for an English teacher. And so,
That's very exciting. And, it's something that we as Americans should be aware of, and something
mhm,
that you've been aware of and you've been taking advantage of for like 5 or 6 years now.
mhm. Yeah, no, just super lucky and super fortunate. And then, yeah, I just was lucky enough to come. I feel like I came to Chile at the right time and found the right girl. And that's kind of now has taken me for my plan for the rest of my life, I think. And so I feel very
Wow.
fortunate. And so,
So when you say your girl, you mean you are, I mean, I know, but you're engaged to a Chilean.
Chile, that I
Okay.
met here in Chile. Yeah.
A
Um,
Chilean national, like a person with
yeah.
Chilean citizenship.
Yeah, very, very Chilean. Her parents live on the coast, families from the coast. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Very excited for the wedding and very excited for what the future holds. And so, and at
Yes,
least for me, I feel like in the United States, things are like pretty set. And sometimes, I don't know, it kind of felt like a little undiscovered here coming to Chile in some sense. Like, I don't know, I've been able to make a really nice niche for myself here. And like something like buying land, which being a teacher in the United States, trying to buy like a piece of land and build a house on, like, I always thought of that being a little unattainable. But here in Chile, like, it seems very attainable. And so, feel very fortunate to be here and to have met my fiance.
that's very exciting, and I'm glad you feel that way. And so, is that the future you see for yourself? You see it in Chile. You don't see yourself coming back to the United States. At least that's not in the plan.
No, not in the plan now. I really like Chile. I really like being in South America. I like the culture. Every country has like a different feel to it, I guess. Like living in Spain, living in the United States, and living in Chile. And I just really like the people here. And I hate to say it, but being a gringo here, like being an American here, is a privileged class. And I feel it. Like in Uber, I swear, my first couple months here, multiple Uber drivers asked me to go to their barbecues on the weekend because they wanted me to like meet their children to help them teach English. Uber drivers inviting me to their house just because I'm an American that speaks English. And so I really like that here, and I really have been able to use that to my advantage. And so just really liked the whole feeling. And I don't know, the Chilean people have been incredibly nice and incredibly welcoming. Just really a great country, I feel.
I'm glad you.
Obviously, every country has their own problems, but I like Chile a lot.
That's good that you feel that way. It's important to love where you live
Hmm.
and feel aligned with the way things are going there.
Hmm.
I think, it's pretty interesting you touched on that subject. Like, you're a little privileged for being an American in Chile. I think, one of the reasons for that is that we were given, especially you and I, coming from pretty privileged childhood, a pretty, safe, secure childhood. We were given lots of opportunities. We were
Hmm.
given a high quality education, and it's opportunity. I mean, you said, you mentioned it, like even being in America, like you didn't see that vision of, you know, purchasing land and, building a house as a realistic goal. But in Chile, you could do something that, you love, something that you can do. I mean, it's not like, you're like, oh, I have to go create a company and then, get make so much money and then I can buy this, pretty expensive piece of land and then
Hmm.
hire this pretty expensive contractor and then, be, I don't even know how much debt for how long.
Hmm.
Instead, it's like you use the tools you were given, you found an opportunity that aligned with, something that you felt comfortable with. Because I feel like, we as Americans, we can always like, we want really high quality, really, you know,
You want the
I,
best, the newest, the
yes.
fastest, yeah. Hmm.
And it's not easy to attain. It's really difficult to attain, actually.
No, because it's the rat race, like just like you might have the newest iPhone, but there's a new one coming out next year. Like, oh, you might have like the nicest house on the block, but a couple years from now, someone's gonna have a better one. And
Yes.
here I feel like it's kind of like the rat race in the United States, and I definitely felt that in the United States. And here, like while there is still that, it's like to a little bit of a less degree, I feel like, and especially growing up in California, where it's like I feel like you have in Southern California, South Orange County, like you have like some of the nicest stuff in all the world, you know.
Yes.
I definitely felt that a little bit more than here. Where here, like no one judges you on like, or at least I haven't really felt it. No one judges you on like what watch you have or what car you're driving. So
No. And you go into that area with a, a very diverse, high value skill set. And
yeah,
it's,
skill
diverse.
set. Being born in the United States and speaking English,
I mean,
it's
it's not,
so lucky.
it's, not just, to be honest with you, it's not just being born in the United States, because there are a lot of people in the United States that don't have a high quality education. There are a lot of people in the United States who, weren't able to go to school. I guess you
Mhm,
said be able to speak English and get a degree, but like there's a lot of background. There's a lot of people in the United States don't have the patience or emotional ca- intelligence or capability to be a teacher, a quality teacher. It's, I do think that it's a privilege being raised in the United States, because we were exposed to so much. We were given, such a good quality education all the way from K through undergrad. And, even after that, like you got your, what was that certificate you spoke about, the 120 hours?
the TEFL, but that's like a really easy thing.
Well, it's easy, but it's easy for an American. It's easy for someone who's been through the California university system, California college system.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily easy for someone from another part of the world to
Hmm.
attain that certificate.
Hmm.
So it's like, and another thing, like, I've trained people abroad in computers, and simply the like moving a mouse, finding the proper place to click and clicking that systematic process is not so obvious to many people. Where in the United States, having a laptop, by the time we were like, I think, by 2011 was like, if you don't have a laptop, you're kind of handicapped,
Especially going to university, like going to
especially going to university. So, like, we're using laptops every single day because one, it's cheaper in the United States to obtain a laptop. And then two, it's just like the standard, because everyone we know is going to get an education and they're all needing laptops and they're all, purchasing laptops. And so like we're with these tools every day, and we go on the internet and we download applications, and some of us code software, or some of us write documents or spreadsheets. And so we're learning how to use these tools. But like people who don't have own a laptop or don't have access to a computer, so they're not able to use a desktop or a laptop at least, even twice a week, which is a low number. Like
Mhm.
for America, like for you and me, like twice a week is like twice in 3 hours. And it's like they don't have the education, the knowledge, the experience just on a desktop.
Mhm.
And that is a huge handicap. And so, and not to say it's unique to the United States. I mean, people all over the world, Chinese people, European people, people in the Middle East. But I don't think it's to the degree of the people in the United States, or, maybe Europe, but even the United States, where it's like you need a computer, you need to know how to use it. And that's one of your, tools in your toolkit. It's
Mhm.
probably the most important tool in your toolkit.
Yeah. Kind of like how Wi-Fi now is become like a basic necessity in the house, like a basic utility, like it's necessary. Like how like
Yes.
almost everybody has Wi-Fi and it's like necessity just because like that's kind of how the world's like transformed into a bit with like all the need for technology and so
It's
and
very
like we are.
interesting. What?
Mhm. No, no, just gonna say like we are very fortunate in the United States that like we have like that basically. Like we
Yes.
have like such the access generally and so. But
Yes,
then it really puts people in the United States as a disadvantage if they don't have access to that and haven't had
absolutely.
access, especially starting off young. And so,
Yes, it does. And then they still have to deal with the extremely high level of competition around them because getting out of there
well,
isn't
it
as
takes more
easy.
work to get to
Yes.
the normal level when you're starting off in a disadvantage like that. So,
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's not easy, you know, and we spoke before, like the United States has a massive population. I mean, it's
hmm
not as big as China's or India's, but I think it's third,
hmm
third largest. And so it's not easy creating systems for the entire population to prosper. But hopefully, you know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a complex issue, and like we said, we're grateful to be have the base education that we were given, and then be able to, you know, I think you like you're doing, utilize it on an international stage, which
hmm
is huge.
hmm No, yeah, I've really enjoyed my time living outside the United States in other countries, just seeing how other people live and all that. Yeah, just seeing different like priorities, how people prioritize things here, how people live their lives here. And so, because I think at least too in the United States we have like a very big focus on the United States and
Yes.
like big value on like living in the United States, but it's like just because people live in Chile or live in a different country, like those lives are like just as meaningful and valuable, and like I'm sure they find the same value as people in the United States in their lives, and so it's like cool seeing different types of lifestyles and how people are happy in different places of the world.
Yes. And you mentioned it, like when we're in the United States, we do have a very, you know, USA centric feed
hmm
of events and news, like especially being like 18 and younger, like pretty much all news I really ingested was like USA only.
hmm
And then I traveled abroad, especially after college, and you know, you're able to take in socioeconomic, socio-political subject matters that's being presented to you and actually have a more nuanced and developed opinion about it. You realize, wow, there's a lot of information and a lot of events, you know, issues around the world that I was completely clueless about.
hmm
And you know, I've been traveling to Mexico a lot, and that's a nice break. That's a nice view for me because it's like that's a bit more globalized country, a bit
hmm
more open to, you know, a global viewpoint. Whereas the USA, it's very the scope of the USA is almost exclusively on the USA.
Yeah. And I think that comes from two reasons. One, a little bit like, in the United States, we're the best, we have the best country, all that stuff. So I think a little bit comes from that. But also I think one of the reasons is the United States is just so big too.
Yes.
Like, when I was in Europe, people forgot, like they're like, but how could you not know what's happening like in this country in Europe? And it's like, listen, like the United States is as big as Europe. Like I knew stuff that was happening in California, in New York, in Florida, in Texas, like it's not just like it's big and like it's very diverse, and so like that also I think is why it's very US centric, is because you see the bad news in New Jersey and then Oklahoma's doing this and Ohio had this happen, and it's like, yeah, well, when you live in Europe, it's like, yeah, obviously, like what's happening in France and Italy because you see the news, because it's like what's close to you as well, and so I think that's like one of the reasons.
Yes. And people in those places don't know anything about Oklahoma or,
No,
you know, Ohio or
no.
anything going on in Indiana. They know if
Mhm.
something happens like New York or LA or
California, yeah.
San Francisco, or, you know, they're going to hear the very, very big topics, and probably nothing to do with the exact places too, because most of the things in the United States that are relayed outwards are done on a national scale. So it's like the entire United States is
Yeah,
involved with this one issue,
yeah.
which is, you know, I mean, again, we probably don't get the full scope of the actual issues and events going on in around the world, but almost certainly people around the world don't get the same scope and viewpoint as people within the United States
Hmm.
on American issues.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. And just like, I don't know, more important, what's happening in your own continent as well. Like living
Yes,
in South America, like I know a lot more about what's happening in Argentina and Brazil, like than I ever did. Just because it's like what's close by. So that's the most important news. And so that's another
it's
reason I think why people stay so closed with the news.
yes, and local news is important. Like over the last since I've graduated college, like my appreciation of what's going on in California and what's going on in San Diego
Hmm.
has increased a lot. And my interest in national news, I wouldn't say has decreased, but it hasn't increased at the rate that my interest in local and state, findings have gone, because I think during this pandemic, it was proved how our state governs makes as much of a difference, possibly more difference in our life than what the federal government
Hmm.
is enacting.
Yeah. But I mean, like, also that's, I feel like that's the point of the system as well, that the United States has, is because, like, obviously that local level is more important. And, like, obviously people in California understand the problems there more than they're going to understand the problems in, like, Oklahoma, or
Yes,
Kansas. And, like, the vice versa. Like, people in Kansas are going to have a very different view than, like, how things should be run than the people in the United States. But, like, speaking to, like, the local level, like living in Chile, which is around 18 million people, it really gave me perspective. Like, here's a country, like fully functioning country, that's like has all these own problems and like all its own like fights and things like that. But like it's 18 million people. It's like we're talking less than half of California population
yes,
wise. And so I think that also gave me perspective on the United States of like just how big the United States is, because you have so many countries where it's like 18,000 to 18 million people or 30 million people. And it's like that's less than California. And so like,
yes.
mhm,
It
that's
changed,
like,
what go?
no, no, no. Like, that's just changed my perspective a little bit.
Absolutely. It changes everything. And when people say, why don't we have the same social welfare state as some of the Nordic countries, it's like, well, there's 6 million people in Sweden, and I think there's less in Norway, and, you know, less in Denmark. Um, so just do those systematic processes you're speaking about scale to 50 times as many people as that? Maybe, but one, the cost is going to be dramatically higher, and two, the logistics cost is going to be even exponentially higher because the distance across these people is so vast compared to Denmark or Sweden or Norway, where like how much of Norway is actually you know able to be lived in? Like it's
Hmm.
got to be less than 20% of the country of Norway is actually livable. So like the logistics of like spreading out the supply and aid and services is much less intense than doing that in the United States. And
Yeah.
actually, like I spoke with an Australian, and he brought that concept of economies of scale, really opened that up to me, because he mentioned like how Amazon doesn't work very well in Australia, because in Australia there's less than 30 million people in the country, and the country is the size of the mainland of the United States. So
Yeah.
if that's less than a tenth of the people, with about over 70% of the land mass.
Hmm.
So the reason that Amazon wouldn't work is, at least as far as this Australian citizen was explaining it to me, was you might order something on Amazon for me, say in San Diego. Well, there's probably like 5 or 10 other people in this city that want that exact same thing. Whereas because the size of the population, other than Sydney, which is like has I think like over a third of the population,
Wow.
yeah, over a third of the population, like 11 million plus people live in like Sydney and its
Wow.
suburbs. So like just this doesn't scale outside of Sydney. Like,
Mhm.
if you live in Perth or Darwin or Brisbane, the chances of that are much smaller also because there aren't like a bunch of other major cities. Like they might not be in San Diego, but someone might be in LA or
Mhm.
someone, might be in San Francisco. So if they send it out to like a place in like Central California and then it's distributed from there, it can go to all these major cities. And then you have Portland up there and Phoenix down there, or Phoenix to the east, and all these, Vegas, northeast. There's a lot of huge metropolitan cities where that economy of scale, goes out. But so there's something we have to keep in mind is logistics and distance across land. And you've mentioned it too when you said like the United States is big. It's the size of Europe. The mainland of the United States is the size of Europe.
Mhm.
So there's a reason like, and you mentioned it with Chile, like United States has what, over 100 to 200 times as many people as Chile.
20 times.
20 times. Okay, nice. That's 200 would be a lot,
Yeah.
but still it's
Mhm.
it's a lot.
Mhm. No, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I do get the point a little bit with like the healthcare system and stuff. It might not scale, but I do think the United States can do way better with healthcare. I think like that's just it's crazy, the United States, how expensive things are and all that stuff. But I've seen like different systems, like in Spain, obviously they have like universal healthcare. And then here in Chile, it's like a mix. They have two systems. They have like ISAPRES, which are private insurance, and then they have FONASA, which is just like a universal government insurance that everybody's on once you're working. Like the taxes go directly to that as well. And so you can decide, like, if you want the public one, like it's always there and it's always there to help. But like, I don't know, for me and my girlfriend or my fiance, we pay for the private insurance. But the private insurance I pay here is like way less than what it would ever be in the United States, and things could just cost less. And so yeah, I don't
There's
know.
what
Mhm.
go
No, I just think like we could do better for people that are like with lower levels of insurance or like or that are uninsured. Because especially with the
Absolutely.
uninsured, we end up paying for that anyways because they have a footache and they don't do anything about it, and then it gets really, really, really bad. Then they go to the ER, and then we pay for it anyways. And so with the taxes, and so like that bill goes directly to the government. So I think we could do
Absolutely.
better, but I don't know the system, and I'm not smart enough to figure it out. That's why I teach English.
Yes, it is deep and complex economics involved in that. And
Yeah.
there's, the system, the medical service system in the United States is not simple. It is not obvious what's going on. It's not obvious why some people are being charged hundreds of thousands of dollars for procedures that will be a tenth of the price, if not less, in the neighboring countries,
Or free.
and or free.
Well, I mean,
You
it's not
know,
free because it's universal healthcare, and like
you
you're
know,
paying through that through taxes anyways in those countries, and so. But
the interesting thing, I recently saw a tweet that said anything someone else provides shouldn't be a right because it's someone else providing the service.
but
And
like, does that count for like healthcare or?
I think they were applying that to healthcare, education.
But I believe everybody has the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and pursuit of happiness and life definitely depend on your health.
That's true, but someone has to provide that.
Yeah.
Someone is providing those services. And so I think the point the tweet was making is like the person who's providing those services needs to get paid for their services. And so that's just interesting. It's like,
Mhm.
if you're saying it's a right, then, you know, it's just, it's interesting because that kind of put it in perspective to me, because I do have that free market mentality that, like, okay, that doctor is, providing a service. How that doctor is getting paid is very not obvious. It's not.
Well, speaking to the free market, if hospitals would put like this procedure costs this much, if we just had price menus at every hospital, boom, that's huge, you know? Like it's just because like a lot of our healthcare system is so like in the dark, and there's the back deal rooms between the insurance and the hospital where like an aspirin is going to cost you $250 for that one thing of aspirin if you don't have insurance. But if you have insurance, like they have the backroom deal for it. And so I don't know. But I do agree, like it's the free market would help the health insurance industry a little bit more if it was more transparent in its pricing.
Absolutely. And you want to, like, something interesting that was presented to me is that since the 70s, for about, I don't know how long, I would like to say since the 70s or since the 90s, somewhere in between those,
Hmm.
there have been three medical services that have not been covered by insurance. Those medical services have transparent menus available before the procedure.
Hmm.
Also, those three services have all dropped in cost since they've been taken off of insurance. Those three procedures are cosmetic based surgeries, surgeries that have no medical function and they're simply there for cosmetic features. I believe gastrointestinal, gastric, like bypass surgery, and LASIK eye surgery, which I got. And I actually was able to compare prices from different providers before going in.
Hmm.
And actually, there's Groupons available for LASIK eye surgery. So that's like, when I heard that point, that single point, that there are three procedures in the last 20 to 30 to 40 years that have not been provided insurance, the prices have gone down and they have transparent, like, because there knows insurance, then the medical providers have to put their pricing out, to the people so that the people can decide because it's coming straight out of their pocket.
Hmm.
That changes everything, because now you're just like, but you're right. And I spoke about this earlier with someone. Transparent pricing, transparent pricing is huge.
Hmm.
It's very interesting how some of the big ticket purchases we make in this country are extremely regulated,
Hmm. Well,
which is
yeah.
understandable
Hmm.
because people can get, financially destroyed. They can be
Well,
taken advantage of.
what's 60% of bankruptcies in the United States? Medical debt. Like
Really?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the number. Like 60% of bankruptcies are medical. Okay, let's check that. We should probably check that before we put that out there. But it's a really high number of bankruptcies in the United States are due to medical debt. And it's crazy. Like that's crazy. Like no one, just because you have an accident, no one should have to lose their house and lose their life because they have an
No,
accident. And so
no,
something needs to happen. And I think like it's just way too, it's crazy. Like an ambulance ride costing $3,000 for an uninsured person is just why? Like how? Like, and
absolutely.
so it's just like a little too crazy right now. And so, and I feel like whether it's more open market pricing, like something needs to be done, at least in the United States. But I don't know
Absolutely.
what. Mhm.
Something needs to be done. I mean, you know, we don't want it to, things are bend or break. And it seems like it's getting to the point of break.
Mhm.
And we don't want that. We want a system that's flexible, one that can adjust. And, we can't be doing this to the basic, population. We can't be, one, like, I don't want to say threatening because it's not a direct threat to anyone from any direct person, but it's kind of like this systematic, you got to be aware of this.
Mhm.
Also, decoupling insurance from employers is huge, I think,
Huge, huge, because
because
you take that cost away from the employers, and yeah, no, it's crazy right now.
it
And like
is.
COVID showed us, like when you have a bunch of people losing work because of a deadly disease, that's maybe not the best thing. Because like if you lose your job because of COVID, like then you lost your insurance, and it's like no one should have to lose their insurance just because of the job like that. And so
No, no. And then have to worry about providing, like they're going to get the treatment. They're going to get the treatment from the hospital. The hospital is legally required to treat anyone that enters,
mhm,
regardless of their insurance status. The issue is when they're handed a bill at the end for $230,000.
mhm,
That's the issue. That's when your home can be lost. That's when lives can be destroyed, families can be destroyed.
mhm.
It's not good. It's
Yeah.
not fair. And again, we want it to bend. We want it to be flexible so people can live and not be so distressed from this.
Hmm. It's yeah, crazy. And so everyone deserves life. Everyone deserves to be healthy. Well,
Yes.
yeah, unless you're
I'm
like me, a smoker. Then it's like if you're smoking cigarettes and your lungs are bad, it's like you deserve to have bad lungs.
well,
Like
you don't
besides
deserve it.
situation. Well, you know the risks,
Yes.
and so like
Yes.
I completely understand like people that smoke cigarettes like a little bit higher, like stuff like that when you have things like that,
What do
where
you
it's
mean
like
higher? Like higher premium?
like higher prices or higher premiums, yeah. Or like what they did in California, where it's crazy. They doubled the price of cigarettes because that 100% increase in price just went to taxes. And so
Did
it's
they
like,
really increase it
yeah,
by 100%?
2016, price of a pack of cigarettes went from $5, like $6 in California, to 10 to 12. Literally did 100% tax of the price of cigarettes. And like the thought process was that will help to cover the costs that like smokers have in the hospitals. But I mean, doubt that money's going there. But you know, and like for
That,
everybody was like, oh yeah, fuck, oh yeah, hell yeah, make smokers pay more for their cigarettes. That's fine. And so
yeah, I might have even said yes to that, but that's a
yeah.
flawed sense of thinking. I
Mhm.
don't, like you said, I don't, and as the more I read about this, it's like very difficult to say, oh, we'll take money from X and put it in Y. It doesn't really fix the root issue, and it kind of sometimes makes things more complicated and more difficult. Not to say that we should just blatantly ignore the issue at hand, because things matter. We want incremental improvements. We want things to get better, but it's not always obvious how this is, whether that be through, you know, health or whatever. There's so many things: education, health, uh, all of that, news, and freedom of speech, which in this country is absolutely one of the hot topics right now. Um, it's not simple.
Yeah. But I mean, like, freedom of speech to me is like making sure the government doesn't control what you're saying. The government can't censor you more than anything.
Yes, which
Like,
is what?
no, 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 which is like the big thing. Like, when the government is the one that's not allowing, like, certain things, or when the government is outlawing certain, yeah. And so,
It's
besides
very
like hate speech and that, or like inciting violence or things like that, or saying fire in a crowded building that creates the stampede.
yes. It's I think the United States does a good job of that. I think most presidents, like throughout our lifetime, kind of get bashed. Like while
Yeah,
they're in office, like all of
I
them.
mean, the
Like
other side is always just shitting on the current, like it's always, I mean, it's both sides. You have a left
yes,
president, a Democrat president. The Republicans shit on everything he does, and you have a Republican president. The Democrats shit on everything he does. And that shows free speech because you don't have the government or the president saying, like, oh, you guys can't say that about me. And so,
yes. And it's very good. I mean, it seems a lot of the times that, we've got kind of it seems like the United States is always in a state of chaos because I think because of the press, but I think that press really assists in keeping everyone grounded, aware that, you know, to question, keeping people questioning, and it really keeps that status quo that, like, you know, it's important that freedom of speech. We want to be told the skeletons in the closet, the not so great things that are going on. We don't want to be blinded to that. We don't want to hear how great the United States is. The United States is a great country. It's not that hard to see that. It's really not that hard to see that. But what's going to make us improve is recognizing that, respecting that, trying to improve it, but also seeing where things that we're not doing so hot at.
And maybe some things that we haven't done so great in the past, like learn
Yes.
from those mistakes. Be like, oh, maybe our government shouldn't do stuff like that.
Yes. Yes.
But I also feel like right now people have a tendency to think like right now is crazy and the sky is falling and all that
Yes.
type of stuff. But I do really think like today is the best moment in history ever to be alive. And 10
Absolutely.
years from now is going to be like, granted, like everything swings back and forth a little bit. But overall, like, like
Goes
think
up.
about like the 60s. Who's going to say the 60s is better than now? Like 70s, like had their own problems. Like we were at war, like 80s as well. Like not, so it's just like, I don't
Yes.
know.
The
People have,
likelihood of us dying premature deaths has dramatically decreased.
Mhm.
And, being poor is not good. Getting people out of poverty is very important. But I feel, I recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, I was, I listened to a podcast that spoke about the Chinese class movement of the last 20 years, how China has created a pretty large wealthy class, but also a pretty substantially large middle class,
yeah,
and from
from like a
poverty.
rural populations. Yeah.
Yes, and just that alone, just the transition of China's impoverished class becoming middle class and some of them becoming extremely wealthy is a big win for humanity, for
Mhm.
all of humanity. And another thing, I like to say this, I've said this a couple times, the mass implementation of text messaging through cell phones has increased the literacy rate on the continent of Africa to, I believe, over 80%.
Wow.
Simply because
Technology.
people want to socialize, and doing it over text is the easiest way. So people are constantly reading and writing, and it's amazing. And that in itself is an amazing accomplishment because now, say, I was training people that didn't use cell phones so much. Well, guess if these, new younger kids are able to obtain cheap cell phones, cheap network plans, text with their friends, somehow obtain cheap Wi-Fi, go on the internet, they can do so much. They can do so much. And their capability to educate themselves is as high, maybe not as high because being around people is important, but it's so much higher than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago.
I
Like,
mean,
what
yeah.
go?
I think what's crazy to think about sometimes is like, so like 50 years ago, how much information did children like process every day versus kids that are born right now? The information that like kids are processing with their cell phones. Like, I have to imagine we're going to see exponential increases in like in something, like in whether it's
Yes.
intelligent, like the kids today, like if they can
anxiety.
survive social media and the anxiety that all that stuff's and like the negative impacts of that and like that, but like humans are starting to absorb so much more information. I feel like that's got to make some changes, like at least, or like create some benefits in the future. And I just think it's crazy. Like we have the whole wealth of whole like human information, like in the cell phone, whole wealth of human information in the cell phone. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's very crazy. And everyone has access to it.
Mhm.
It's not privileged information anymore,
Mm-mm.
which
No,
is
and
well, go.
oh no, I was just gonna say that's why access to technology is so huge, and like there
Yes.
really should be pushes for access to technology and like, um,
Everywhere.
yeah, everywhere. Hmm.
Anyone, any country that wants, really, I think that's it. Like, there's an important part to play with students going to school with each other and experiencing things with each other, no doubt. Like, kids, adolescents, teenagers, preteens, young adults, they need to be socializing
We're
constantly.
social beings. We need that. Yeah,
We are
in the development, it's so key.
we are social animals for sure.
Mhm.
It's so key. And you know, but that actual transfer of knowledge, like you said, as a teacher, you save so much time teaching. You're able to do more classes, you're able to not commute, you're able to, not necessarily have to take a shower, put on a high quality
Well, I never said
outfit.
that, but even though
Well,
it's true, even though it's very true,
well,
sometimes just wash the hair and then yeah.
yes, yes, exactly. It's a huge, like, that's like 45 minutes a day, like.
Mhm.
And so that's the same with the student though too. Like, now a student, I had a friend homeschooled, and he would say he'd just get his stuff done. He also had 5 siblings, so it's a little different.
Mhm.
He would get his stuff done, and then he would go adventure for the rest of the day. And it's like, okay, then you have 5 siblings, so then you're able to get your social in a little bit. But wow, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily love homeschooling, the idea of it, but it's, there are other ways outside of the education system to socialize a young person.
Mhm.
Although that's the standard today, with the rate of online education available, high quality, I'm guessing it's only going to become better and better. There's going to be more outlets for children to learn at home.
Mhm.
They're going to be simpler, and they're probably going to be easier than they were over the last 2 years, with a lot of people adopting these sort of
Mhm.
practices.
But I
And
think for education, like especially going from like with young children up to like adults, like the older you get, the more appropriate online is. Because I think when you have younger children, you do want them interacting more in the real world rather than on a screen. Or like younger children tend to get distracted more often, like with
yes,
online education. And so I think
I
like as the
understand.
ages go up, like like more online education. Where like younger, I wouldn't want to do too much online.
That makes sense. That is a good point right there. Even the ability to focus on a screen, it improves
And
over
I
age.
don't I don't want my young kids to be focused on screens, you know. I'd rather have them like in a classroom with a teacher, like, you know. And if it's online, like that type of stuff requires more parental help because it's harder for the children to focus.
That's very true.
Because
There's
also a part of education is daycare a little bit, you know, with younger ones.
yes,
Because parents have to work, and so
yes, yes. It's important to not change so dramatically so quickly too.
yeah, yeah, because you don't want to break everything, and so, but
No,
at least like with like online adults, like you know, that's a crazy change to go from all in person to all that, but it's fine because like adults can handle that change and they can voice their concerns, and if they're not learning properly or they don't feel they're learning properly, they can voice that, and then they can change. Where like children, like you know, you don't want to change that way too much.
no, it's more difficult for them to voice it in a
Hmm.
productive manner.
Hmm.
It's interesting though. I'm excited to see, the future of your career and the careers of teachers and of education.
Yeah, very important education it is.
Very important. And you and I got great educations, and
Hmm.
we're blessed for that. And we're
Hmm.
been given so many opportunities as a result that, people with lower levels of education, frankly, could not attain.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we really growing up in South Orange County really were just like one of the most privileged places like to grow up. Like, and
Absolutely.
so and
Very
like our
grateful.
yeah, my parents love my parents. They're the best, Russ and
Yes.
Tracy, and
Russ
so
and Tracy are the best for sure. Shout
mhm,
out to them. Love
yes.
them.
They had a great time meeting my fiance's parents. That was interesting,
Wow.
because my fiance's parents don't speak any English, and my parents don't
Wow.
speak any Spanish, and so it was pretty interesting to watch those interactions.
What was the interaction like?
Good, good. I mean, especially because my parents brought like tequila and champagne, so like once like alcohol really is the great social equalizer.
Yes.
Like couple drinks in you, and like everybody's having a good time. And so,
Yes.
because I think both sets, my parents and my fiance's parents were like worried, they're like, oh, I want them to like me. And then, like, once they both realized, like, oh, they're good people, everything's
Yes.
fine.
It's
Hmm.
very interesting, the that language difference. That's good that,
Hmm.
you know, everyone felt comfortable.
Hmm.
Wow. Well, shifting to a different topic,
Hmm.
one that I wanted to speak about. So, Devin, you have been for many years an adamant fiction reader.
Hmm. Fiction, fantasy, yeah, all that. Hmm.
What do you like about reading fiction and fantasy?
I like exploring the worlds that other people have created. Definitely, like it's a nice little escape. Same with like video games. Always used video games as an escape. I think it's really interesting, like the creativity of people. Like when I was younger, I'd have like toys and like create my own worlds, and so I really like exploring like these other worlds that people have created. And like, oh no, you can be with fiction and fantasy. They can be whatever you want. So it's really interesting to see how people take things, and all writers try to add like their own like wisdom in their books, and so it's interesting to see that come out through like the character themes that they decide, or like how a character transitions from like good to bad or bad to good, and then like different views on perspective as well. It's
What
very
do you mean by
interesting.
perspective?
No, just like you have like two people that like go through the same experience and they see it differently, and sometimes that's in books. And so you can see like how some people internalize other like some things, and others are going to internalize it a different way. And so everyone's a little bit different, and I think that really comes out in fantasy.
What do you think is the difference between fantasy novels and fantasy TV shows or movies?
Fantasy novels definitely more in depth because you have the characters' thoughts and you have the characters' like actions, like how they justify their actions and why they're doing these certain things. Where in like TV shows and movies, you can't really show that, like what the people are thinking. Where most of the time, especially like narrative stories, that's all you're getting. You're getting a person's point of view and like why they did this, how they like reacted to that situation, where like you can't really get any of that in a movie.
That's very true. Actually, I was listening to the audiobook of Dune recently. Have
Mm.
you have you read Dune?
Hmm.
What do you think about it?
Really good. But I think I agree with like the general thing where the first book is really good, and then like I tried to read the ones that come after, and I really found a drop in quality. Like Dune was amazing,
The
but
first book.
yeah. Hmm.
Okay, interesting. It was amazing.
Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib and Chani, and yeah.
And what's the planet called?
Ooh.
It starts with an A.
Hmm.
I forgot the name.
Yeah, me too.
The desert planet
Hmm.
where water is very
Scarce.
valued. Yes, very scarce.
Hmm.
I thought it was great, and actually, the reason I brought it up is because of exactly what you said. Like the thought patterns. Like I listen to the thought patterns of various characters, and like hearing it kind of puts it more into perspective. Like this is like 30 seconds of an individual speaking about just this person's thoughts. There's no way that could be, in a movie.
Mhm.
There's no visual there. It's just like this person thinking. And you're right, it adds a lot of layers of complexity to it.
Mhm. And that's the best, like when it's complex and like I don't know, they can just dive like way more into the story in books, which is why I've always love when it goes to the TV show and love movies. I love the Harry Potter movies. I loved a couple seasons of Game of Thrones, definitely not the last one. But like you just get way more out of the books, I find. And so that's why I've been reading forever.
What did you think about the last three Harry Potter movies?
The last three Harry Potter movies.
Like
They were all
six.
right,
Okay.
they were all right. Nothing too bad or too terrible in them. Like I did find it weird, like my biggest complaint will always be like my biggest complaints is like Dumbledore in the Goblet of Fire. Like he's like, Harry, did you put your name in the goblet? And it's like, dude, calm down. Dumbledore would never put his hands on a student and like yell at the student in his face. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. But in the last movies, I thought like the magic was kind of a little weird. And Voldemort should have been like a normal body. Like he's described as like when he died, like he's like a normal body dead. But they had like some fantastic like way he died for like the cinematography or whatever, but it's like that's not how it was supposed to be or whatever. But overall,
Got
pretty not bad. I really do like the Fantastic Beasts one. The first and the second were pretty good. I haven't seen the most recent one. I don't even know when that one's coming out. But
What's the Fantastic Beast?
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Not like an actual. Well, there was an actual book, which is like the encyclopedia of like Fantastic Beasts. And then they created like a spin-off movie about it, about the author of the book.
What is Fantastic Beasts? Is
It's
that related
from
to
it's
Harry
from like the
Potter?
Harry Potter. Yeah, like they talk about it. Like I think they mentioned the book like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them once in the books or once or twice in the books. And then I think they created it at some point in the past, like the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book. And then they created the movies about the writer or the author. And
So
so
that wasn't a J.K. Rowling work.
Not like I think Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, like that actual book, which became like I don't know if it's an encyclopedia or like a description of the animals. But that I think was written by J.K. Rowling. And then but like she didn't create any of this story really.
Okay.
But like some of it is from like the books because it also talks about like Dumbledore with like his rival when they were younger, so you see like young Dumbledore. And so like that story is pretty tied, and so because do know that history, and so they're
Got
adding
it.
on to that story a little bit because Dumbledore talks about it a little bit, and Harry has to discover like how he had this relationship with this guy, this evil dark wizard, and yeah.
Okay. I've never heard of this series or this book.
Mm. No, I really liked the first movie, and so like I really liked the first movie. I thought it was nice, fun, interesting, and it because the first book or the first movie takes place in the United States, so you get to see the magical Congress of the United States, and so
Wow.
yeah,
The United States has its own magical entities.
obviously,
Wow.
if Britain has their stuff, like obviously, and so
Separate from the Ministry of Magic.
yeah, no, it's I think
Wow.
they call it like the MACUSA or whatever, like the Magical Congress of the United, yeah, and so.
Wow.
So they've
That's
expanded like off, like in the world of Harry Potter, but they've expanded it and so taken liberties, obviously, I'm sure.
wow.
Hmm.
Yes. Probably taken liberties for sure.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. These I don't know, the the level of detail that an individual goes to create a book, a novel. It's and you mentioned it, like they're bringing in their own sense of wisdom too into the novel and trying to communicate that to you. It's not just there's something that the novelist is attempting to communicate with the story.
Hmm. Generally there's always like that little underlying piece of knowledge, or yeah. And I do like the complexity and all that. And it's interesting seeing, like, right now I'm reading, or one of my favorite series is Red Rising, and there's a lot of talk about maybe that's going to become a show at some point. And so, like, because I think the author sold the rights, and then he ended up buying them back because he didn't like how, like, they were doing things. So, like, that's a series I would really like to see expanded into, like, television, or maybe like animated, to have it a little bit more true. Things like that.
Yes. And one practice that you take on is you read the same novel multiple times.
Yes, that is probably my weirdest habit. And yeah, I reread everything a lot, a bunch of times, and that's just because I really enjoy seeing, because I have what I like, and I like the storyline, and I like the characters, and I love, like, I don't know, I love the series, and so I like to reread it, and every time, like, generally a different perspective going in, like, oh, I'm going to reread it thinking about this character and his interactions like this, or I'm going to reread it, and you see different things every time. And so that's really one of my favorite things to do. I don't read too many new books. I generally stick to the ones I've already read, but like a few new books.
Ha-
Especially my fiance has started me reading new books every now
Spanish
and then.
novels.
No, not really, because when I read, it's generally for pleasure, like pleasure reading. And so when I'm reading a Spanish novel, it's a little bit harder to get through. I have to focus more. I really like to read before I go to bed, so I'm, like, tired. And so, like, tired reading, not great for Spanish with me. I require a little bit more focus to do that.
Yes, I've heard reading fiction in a very relaxed sense is good, and I do it right before bed.
Hmm.
Really, it's like just puts me to sleep.
Yeah, no,
Or
I
you,
mean, I've been reading the Kindle before I go to bed for the last since I was in high school.
wow.
So,
How do you choose whether or not you want to take on a new book? Like, what's your
uh, if
usual like?
someone recommends something to me, I'll read it generally, especially if it's somebody that, like, knows my interests. Or if my fiance says, like, "Oh, you should read this book," and then it's like I'll generally read that then, because she'll read some fiction and fantasy every now and then she wants to get my opinion on it, and depending on if the book is good or not, I'll continue with the series.
Very nice. Reading is kind of, I don't know. I never had the habit before you, seeing you constantly reading definitely instilled that habit, and you got me into Game of Thrones, which was a
Hmm.
very difficult book to read.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is not, like, the easiest read, but
No, I mean, compared to Red Rising, it's much more difficult.
yeah, Red Rising is a little bit easier.
Yes, it is. And then another book you and I both like, Name of the Wind,
Ooh, yes,
incredible book.
incredible. Hmm. Have you finished the second one yet?
Yeah, I have. I
All
didn't
right.
think it was as good. I thought it
Really?
I
Okay.
thought it was good, but I thought, I mean, there were some scenes definitely that were incredible.
Hmm.
Like, what's the main character's name?
Quoth? Or I don't know.
Quoth?
It's so
Oh,
it's so
Quoth.
weird. Yeah, but I think it's like supposed to be like KW, like Quoth. I'm not sure.
Quoth?
It's like
Oh,
the worst. Yeah, he always talks about it too in the book about how to pronounce it or whatever. It's a weird name, or
I always say Quoth with the
uh,
KV,
yeah,
but he does that thing that he's not supposed to. Do you know which scene I'm talking about?
like with the lightning, or which
It
part?
might be lightning, but it also,
Well, it's
yes.
before the lightning, like, because
Yes, it is.
yeah, that's
Yes.
crazy. Yeah,
That's a
crazy.
crazy scene.
Yeah.
And actually, I didn't even think of like, that's true. There are like scenes in a book. And the thing about scenes in a book, it's just crazy when you're like reading this thing and then you're just like, this is absolutely insane what's going on. And it's like, because reading is not like a movie, and I haven't had too much exposure to reading before the last 5 years where it dramatically increased my reading just how much I was reading. And like, so I never understood like the concept of a book scene. Like I understand a scene in a movie, but then, we were talking about a book maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and you mentioned like viewing a chapter in that book as a scene, and it completely changed like how I viewed that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like there can be scenes in a book that are incredible, but the entire book is not that great.
Mm-hmm. And and sometimes and this is always sometimes the problem with going into like sometimes the scenes in the books are crazy and like very intense, and then that doesn't always translate into like the TV show or into the movie as well.
Wow. Is there a movie or TV show that disappointed?
Well, I mean, like obviously Game of Thrones season 8, but I think that's been talked about enough over the last couple. It's crazy because that was like Game of Thrones was a cultural revolution all over the
Yes.
world. People in Spain were obsessed with it. People here are obsessed with it, and then it just died after season 8. Like I don't think there's ever been a crash and burn. That might be the biggest crash and burn of any TV show because it just had such high highs and then such a bad low.
Ending. Yes. It's
Yeah.
not like, do you know about Lost?
Yes.
Like how it also had a terrible ending.
Mm-hmm.
Lost was very different because it ended in an opposite way of Game of Thrones, where
Mm-hmm.
Lost dragged on for so long and they added so many nuances and complexities that it became just too much. And because they kept it dragging on for so long, it was very difficult to end it in any sort of like satisfying way where everything came together. It was just like, dude, you guys left a lot of open threads here and didn't close off everything. Whereas Game of Thrones was just the ending, like so much that we were looking forward to for 7, 8 years. 8 years. The entire fan base was looking forward to seeing a dragon in action. The entire fan base was looking forward to the Night King,
Mm-hmm.
the White Walkers coming down. The entire, we were all looking for how Jon Snow and Daenerys were going to interact and how Tyrion was going to come in and who's actually part of which family and how Cersei and Jamie are going to, go in the Hound. Like all that happened, but it just was like boom.
Well, it was all boom, and they destroyed all the characters. Like Jamie, one of Jamie's things is like he cares about how people think of him. You know, he wants to be liked by the little guy, and he's always wanted that throughout his whole life. You know, his father, they even get his father commenting on that in the first season. But then, going back to Cersei, he's like, oh, I never cared what the people think. It's like, you did. You passed out in a bath because you were upset how Eddard Stark judged you. 12 years later, you were upset when you were recounting the story to Brienne. They just destroyed that character like that. Like Tyrion, like didn't have a single good move later and it's like he's supposed to be one of the smartest people. And freaking Daenerys in season 7, Euron Greyjoy destroys her ships two different times in season 7. And then he does it again in season 8. And the David Benoff and D&B Weiss or whatever their names are, their justification for that was, oh, she forgot about Euron's army. It's like, how is she going to forget about that? Like in the last season, he fucked her over twice. How is he going to forget about his ships? Like, and that just doesn't make sense. Like from anything, her change went from she was fine one episode to she was terrible and crazy the next. Like it was just crazy. And the worst is HBO wanted more seasons. The actors wanted more seasons. Everybody wanted more, except David Benoff and D&B Weiss. They wanted to go to their Disney contract, and that's why it was ended so quickly because the money was there for more seasons. Everybody was happy with more seasons besides those two, and so, or at least that's what I've heard. So,
Wow. Well, it's over.
yeah, it's
Hopefully,
so over.
it's
And
over.
I just want the books though.
Yes.
He's been writing that book, and if he didn't finish it during COVID, I don't think he's ever going to finish it. And so I think Game of Thrones will kind of turn into somewhat of a joke because never finished. You know,
That would
I'm
be a
hoping,
tragedy.
because it ended so terribly in the show, George R. R. Martin like actually wants to finish now, because I think a little bit the show was going so well, George like wasn't as desired to like write, because it was like, oh, the
He was
show's
getting
going so
really
well,
famous.
and like he can complete his narrative like through the show, and then like that's how it's going to end, because the books have become too big for him. Like the story has become too crazy. And so, but now hopefully, because the show was such a failure at the end, he'll like finish the books. And so, same with
Hopefully.
Name of the Wind. I want the third Name of the Wind, and yeah, the final
The-
Red Rising of the second three books.
yes. The Red Rising ones come out at a much faster rate.
Hmm.
They're much less complicated and much less literarily intensive than Name of the Wind or
Hmm.
Game of Thrones
Yes,
or A
definitely.
Story of Fire and Ice.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he's been like coming
A
out with this
song
A
of fire.
Song of Fire and Ice. I mean, I think the first Red Rising came out in 2014, right? Or something like that. Or 2016.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but I know he has, because I started reading them after the first three had already come out, and so I waited for, is it Iron Gold and then Dark Age, or
4 is
uh
Iron Gold. I haven't hit 5 yet.
yeah, and then I think five is Dark Age, and those two I waited for. But that's like a series, I started it and then I like burned through it and then just reread it for the next like month, just a couple times, and so.
Absolutely. I recommended it to a friend, and I was questioning whether I should recommend it to this friend because this friend is a nonfiction reader. Before I recommended this book, I had actually never, he's an adamant reader. I had never seen him read a fiction book. And so I was, hesitant to give it to him, but I was like, I love this story, especially the first one. The first one, the story behind it is magical. Like,
Mhm.
it's such an incredible story. Just if you just ended it right there, like the excitement and the just entertainment I received from just reading the first Red Rising was the most fun I've had reading any book ever.
Mhm.
And the other ones were good and they were entertaining, but not like the first one where it was
Yeah.
just like,
So
wow,
captivating. So captivating.
so
Yeah.
captivating, so captivating. What a great word. And anyone who reads it, like if they come out with a movie, I don't know how much justice they can do to it.
No, it has to be a series. It can't be a
Yes,
movie. It has to be a series. And
yes,
so, no, and like, yeah, for me, there's like important scenes in every movie or in every story. And so like it's super important to get those scenes right. And so I think I kind of trust him, because he sold the rights and then rebought them back a couple years ago, because he didn't like the direction it was going in. And so he's being very like demanding with like how he wants the series done. And so I don't know if live action would look as good, because like also I feel like animated might just be easier to complete,
yes,
like, but just because it's so
absolutely.
crazy the scale of some things. And so
Do you watch, have you seen Demon Slayer or Attack on Titan?
Attack on Titan, yeah.
You haven't seen Demon Slayer?
Not yet.
You've heard of it.
Yeah.
I mean, both of those shows really prove to me that anime is not lesser. It's
No,
not
it's a different art
inferior.
form.
Yes.
It's just different, like from video games to books to TV shows to anime. Like it's all just
And
creativity
by
and
TV
like,
shows, you mean live action.
yeah, or yeah, anything really. It's just different forms of art and different forms of creativity, like, and different types of stories and narratives. And so Attack on Titan's
Absolutely.
freaking amazing, man. It like kind of reminded me of Westworld with like the, oh my god, like the crazy changes.
Yes, it does. And the story is so good. And the initial parts with military logistics and those like cut scenes are so interesting and so different from like an American anything, an American movie, an American show. It's just like really well done.
Hmm. Yeah. Love the story too. So
Did you
just
finish yeah, the story is amazing. Did you finish the show?
Not the newest season. We're still waiting for a good time to binge it. But I have read the manga of Attack
Okay.
on Titan, and so I do kind of know how it ends.
Incredible last season.
Yeah,
Very
crazy.
good.
And like
And
that's one where it's like scenes that are crazy. Like I'll never forget the Aaron versus Bertold and Reiner, where like it's finally revealed who they are.
yes,
And yeah, I'll never forget that fight scene, like just crazy. And then Aaron, when he goes to them, and his transformation there, like in the
yes,
middle of the thing, like that's just a crazy scene too. Like, and so
yes,
I really get into stuff with scenes like that.
absolutely. It's entertaining and people love to be entertained. It's
Mhm.
important. Like we enjoy being
Entertainment
healthy,
has value.
high value,
Mhm. I think
high
people
value.
deserve to relax and break away from the real world. And yeah.
Yes. And speaking of breaking away, I think that's a good point for us.
hmm
Are there any last words you'd like to tell the audience, Devon? We've touched on diverse topics here, but are there any last words regarding Chile
Uh,
or fiction or anything we've spoken about that you'd like to speak towards?
no, just it's a big world out there. There's space for everyone, and everyone has like a place that they can find. And travel is like one of the most amazing things, and especially if you can do it like for like a year or so in the country, it's a very different experience. And yeah, take chances, make mistakes, and be a nice person, and try not to affect the other people's lives in a negative way. Yeah. And thank you for having me on, Krush.
You're welcome. My guest today has been Devon Taylor Gould. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Devon.
Thank you.